I believe there's an Adam here. That's a bit unusual.
Yeah.
How are you?
Well, I have a cold, which makes me staying at home from the scout leadership duties. So now I could join instead.
Aha, the benefits of having a cold.
Yep, have to.
That's good to an extent. Hey, Dini,
Mark, good
hey, Mark.
morning. Hi, Froda. Hi, Mark. Thank you for the email. Thank you for that, sharing that with about Mark's comments. That was great.
Yeah, I mean, because I suspect the number of people who went to web studies for is probably not massive. And like you know, that's the thing. So many conference, it's often the presentation that's more informative than the paper in a way, or you get more from the paper if you saw the presentation.
Well, I always like to hear Mark talk. I like Bernstein's presentations. Are always, I don't know, clever. I mean, he's serious at the same time. He's got a sense of humor. He's got wit.
Yeah, the link. I mean, I think the link through to sort of arts and humanities is deliberate and useful. It's a really nice way of dragging our heads out of the sort of technical mire.
Well, he's always been supportive of arts and humanities, and he's kind of been the, you know, in the hypertext world, there was the artist and there was a scientist. He kind of sat there in the middle, right? He was encouraging the art and humanities in the science part, but he continued to call himself the chief scientist of Vskate Systems, Inc. So he grounded himself in the science, but he, like many scientists, waved well at the humanities. I think it's C.P. Snow, you know, Branowski, people like that. So,
well, I do find myself at the moment, it's like another project I'm in, sort of a bit like the fraught parent who being asked for more and more toys says, well, why don't you finish playing with the ones you've got? You know, because this is how I feel with a lot of technology. The rush is to go and make something new. And
Sorry, is someone talking about new toys? Where?
I mean, it's very valid in terms of like, well, yeah, for instance, well, the visualization experimentations that Adam does and the stuff that Fabienne does, but all too often, like some projects I'm involved in at the moment, the lazy response is, well, let's make another one, you know, if nothing else will be better than the last. And I'm forced to say, will it?
We haven't completely sussed out the first ones. So there's folks here I don't know yet. Adam and Matt. Hi. Welcome.
Adam, you kind of know the work of, and Matt, you well know the work of.
I don't know if I met them before, though. I don't think
Hi.
I met.
Oh no, it's my first time joining. It's nice to meet you.
To meet
you. Yeah, let's see.
I'm the only woman in the room ever, so hi. I'm Dini.
Yeah, that's something we need to put some real effort into next year to change.
We'll do it.
That's for sure. But then again, your presence is strongly felt, so that does compensate somewhat more.
Makes me kind of the queen bee, which is kind of weird. In the humanities, I'm kind of one of a million.
We promise not to kill you.
Or me, you.
Well, the bee queen bee has a pretty rough life, so yeah. Okay, I don't know who else is coming. There will always be someone coming in late, but why don't we do this? Adam, since you are not known to Dini or Matt, would you mind doing a little bit of intro?
Yeah, hi, I'm Adam. I live in Stockholm, Sweden. Well, in this community, I'm kind of I've been here for maybe on and off for three, is it 4 years now? Maybe. And my interest is especially in graphical text. I feel that the computer medium is a way to liberate text in many dimensions, and I think we haven't done it as far as we could for 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions. And I'm also very interested in XR text and working with hands and text and how to and the voice as well, but especially the hands. I feel that the hands have been lost in the and feet as well, but the hands have been lost in the computer revolution. It's all those keyboards, the digital things that are on or off, but we have no like gradual interfaces for things. And I feel that XR is very, very interesting in that sense, because it has many promises for having continuous interactions and much more embodied interactions, and I like that, and I want to explore that for text in particular. Yeah, that's me, or my interests at least.
I just put in the chat here. I'll do it again because Leon just joined us. One of the things that Adam has made real, it's based on data that Mark Anderson cleaned up from the ACM Hypertext Conference. And of course, my pitch along this is if this data had visual meta, Mark wouldn't have to clean it up. And it's if you're a genius, you can make this relatively easily on the web. Other people cannot. So Adam is just like, oh, here, have a look at this. So I think it's very inspirational indeed. And Matt, you know what? I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself last, since you are the newest, so you get more of a sense of who people are. And then you can also explain why you're here and what work of yours I saw on the internet. So I'm going to jump over to my esteemed crime partner, Dini.
Yes, I like being a crime partner. I'm Dini Grigar. I'm on the west coast of the United States in the Pacific Northwest, right across the river from Portland, Oregon. I work at Washington State University, Vancouver. I'm a professor there. I also am the founder and the director of the Electronic Literature Lab, which works in a lot of different areas, but primarily in archiving, documenting, preserving, conserving electronic media, art games and literature. And my interest has been in VR for our virtual worlds for a long, long time, for like 30 years. So Frodo and I just turned in a grant submission for the VR project that he's been thinking about for a long time, which is why we're all here primarily. And so, yeah, I've been working in academia since 1991. No, 1990. So a long time.
Thank you, Dini. Just talking about the whole handing in and thinking and all of this. Yesterday we went family play, children's kind of musical play here in Wimbledon, very local, low-key, very well done. But we had quite a good seats, and it was shocking to me how I have been very constrained about thinking about XR almost within arm's reach for everything, where there's the vague idea of a background. But when you sit in a theater and the resolution is, your eyeballs, the usable space, even if you don't move, of people and things on a stage is absolutely incredible. So I know it's entirely obvious, but as an emotional experience yesterday, I just wanted to fit it in your heads that we do have many layers of distance we can interact with. So yeah, sorry. Right, Dini, followed by Mark Anderson.
Check I'm unmuted. Hi. I suppose my connection here is having met Frode whilst we both studied in the Web and Internet Science department at Southampton University, where I went to take a short work break and do a master's, and somehow fell through a trapdoor and ended up doing a doctorate. And I'm now sort of a resting, semi-retired hypertext researcher. So I have half a foot in the university, and I'm still active in the hypertext community, and especially in Mark Bernstein's Tools for Thought story space, which has also a foot in the hypertext world, a literary hypertext world, and Tinderbox. I think that's all that's fit to print.
Thanks. I used to love calling Mark Mr. Anderson from The Matrix, but then he graduated and ruined it. In between introducing you, I'm going to interject as I do. Please download the book and have a look. If you have written something, have a look at your own piece, of course, but also other things. At the end, I have an AI summary of each of the live presentations from the symposium, some worse than others, all very bad, but I think they're more useful than the huge amount of text that was just spoken. It's a bit of an experiment, so please see how you feel about that. And over to, well, Peter, tell me when it's good for you to take a break. If now, go ahead. If not, we will go Fabienne. Just going by my random screen layout.
Hi everyone, so my name is Fabien and I'm a prototypist. So I don't have the courage to build software proper, just make the bits that I find interesting, hopefully for me and people around me. The prototypes I really find the most interesting right now are at the intersection of the novel interface we have, namely VR, AR, MR, etc. And text, because text is all around us, including code, because as a prototypist, my main job, let's say, is converting crazy ideas to barely usable code to see if they make sense or not. And yes, instead of imagining bits of code in the air, waving my hands, I'm trying to do it, or I'm doing it, not efficiently yet. But thanks to the discussion I had here with all of you, at least in a more fun and interesting way.
Aw, we love you. And you are located where?
And I'm located in very sunny and warm Brussels, Belgium.
I believe you. And nearby is Leon, who is in a co-working space, right? Looks really cool.
Yeah, thank you very much. It does look cool. You're right.
And you're in Hungary, right, at the moment?
Yes. I'm located in Budapest. I am Leon. I consider myself a web XR researcher slash enthusiast. I play with VR, AR, and sometimes I read things which I call research. And so that's basically me. I will keep it a bit short, otherwise I feel a bit naked here.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's kind of useful, by the way, every 6 months or so to do reintroductions with the excuse of someone new. We all got to hear our current up-to-date state of affairs. So I'm going to jump to you, Peter, if you are able.
Yep. Well, I'm an attorney and programmer hybrid and an independent scholar. Primary interest, programming language design, deeply active in the hypertext community and Mark Bernstein's corner of it. Also interested in university futures, world's fairs, whole range of topics. Really, I'm extremely broad.
Yeah, that sounds like you neglected the most important part.
What's that?
We went to the same university.
Oh, of course. Yes, we both went to Syracuse University.
Yeah, so important. And then we have you, Rob, who was second to newest, I would say, in the group.
Yeah, sorry I was late.
Okay.
My big screen wasn't showing me, so it turned out I was on the little screen.
Yeah.
Now I'm on the big screen. I'm a writer. I like to play in the sandbox, and at the moment I'm messing around with Deanie at her lab in Vancouver, and working on books as usual. Let's see. Freud has an old essay of mine in the book this year, I guess. I mean, it was there yesterday. So I just got interviewed by somebody at UC Santa Cruz about Portal and my hypertext work. And she asked me at the end, what's the future of hypertext? So I had to write a paragraph about that, and I stole it all from this group.
That is allowed, to put it like that. So, Matt, thank you for staying up. You are in Thailand, I understand.
That's right. Yeah, it's 11 p.m. here. I'm usually based in San Francisco.
By the way, please, there's no obligation for you to stay the whole entire till 1 o'clock in the morning. So, people come and go as they want. It'll not be seen as rude if you need sleep.
Sure. Sounds good. So, yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for the introductions. I connected with Frode by way of Twitter. I've been sharing demos, basically using hypertext. I'm sure a lot of ideas you all have covered in this arena, but I really think that with large language models and AI written texts, a lot of these ideas are going to be newly interesting and newly valuable, because when you've got sort of the computer writing texts for you, I think tracing things, connecting things, and those sort of primitives are going to just be essential. So that's where I'm coming from. Frode, do you think there's anything else that I should share?
Yes, I think you should share the real coolness that I saw. You should be able
Sure.
to share screen because you are right. These are the kinds of things that have been discussed. But the reason I'm excited that you are here is because you actually made it.
Cool. Yeah, I'll do a demo then.
Please.
So, cool. Let me share my screen. All right. So, I'm just gonna pull in a text. Right now, it's really just websites that you can use the tool I've built with, but other kinds of documents will definitely be interesting in the long run. But so I'll just do like a Wikipedia article, maybe hypertext. And so load this into the tool, and it's pulled the text in. So, okay. So the demo I shared, and I could maybe just show the tweet, but I can also recreate it here. So I'll try to recreate it. So there's different tools for interacting with these texts. For example, distill is going to highlight sentences automatically based on a sort of sense of what the central points of the text are. And that's something you can adjust, like the granularity or the threshold of the filter. And you can also see it as its own page and sort of click OK and make a page out of those highlights. Once you have these are still kind of connected to the original page. So this is like, transcluding or whatever you want to call it. But if I select this text on the right, I see it selected on the left. That's one of the features here. But if I keep going, I can then click to summarize. And so now I'm going to turn this set of excerpts into, an abstractive summary of what this text is about. And so that's great. Again, I can like click OK, have a page of its own. But what we're missing now is any connection between that abstractive summary and those extracted excerpts from the text. And so there's another tool for that, which is correlate. And so this will draw the connections between this abstractive summary and the excerpts. Again, it's kind of a granular filter. I'll just choose a threshold and click OK. So each of these sentences now is connected through. So it goes from here in the summary to an excerpt, and then ultimately all the way back to the Wikipedia article we're pulling from. And each of these should be sort of backed up by what's connected here. I'll show one more just to fully recreate what I shared on Twitter. So I can also cluster, and when I do this, it's going to color the text just based on kind of grouping. So things which are the same color or a similar color should be more semantically proximal is the idea. So now let me just clean up a little bit. So now you have this kind of, here's a summary of the hypertext article. If one of these looks especially interesting, like, you know, the Ted Nelson point here. You can select it, and then you get the, you know, trace all the way back to the actual supporting text. So that's the demo. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Don't stop sharing. Don't stop sharing. Not quite yet.
Okay. I'll leave it up.
Okay, thank you. So, guys, question to everyone: how freaking cool is this? Yeah.
So, Matt, can you answer a few questions for me? So, I'm looking at this. This is what you're developing currently as an AI, right? And you're manipulating text through this interface that you've developed, and you're pulling up anything that's online. Right now, you're showing us Wikipedia, but it could work with any other document that we want to that's on the web or not. Is it PDFs also?
Yes. So it is. So I think there are a couple questions there. It is kind of like a workspace that's going to use AI models. You know, I'm not like reinventing the wheel here, but it's going to use AI models in maybe interesting ways. And the documents themselves right now, it's only web pages right now. But it could also, for example, do Markdown very easily. But getting to PDFs or Word documents, that sort of thing, it's a little bit more of a lift. It's definitely, it fits into the paradigm, but there's just some work to be done there to incorporate those sort of documents.
The reason, Dini, I think this is so cool is AI easily becomes disassociated from the source. Here, it's literally connected. I was one of our first contributors, Timur Shukin, was unfortunately stuck in Russia, really good guy. We were in somewhere in Europe, I think 15 years ago, roughly, talking about something similar to this. And that's easy. This is easy over coffee. It's not quite as easy in reality. So Livia, who most of you know now, she had the idea when we were talking about AI summaries that it's not just good for the reader, but it's also good for the writer. So imagine when you export your paper, you get an AI summary back so that you can see if the system took from it what you expected it to take from it. And the key there being, if there's a sentence in the summary that you believe is wrong, you should be able to click on it and see what in your document contributed to that so you can change your document. So, and again, to repeat and in summary, what I think is so exciting here is that the connection to the source stays through all these things. It's really, really cool.
So in 15 years ago, when you were discussing related ideas, were you anticipating the sort of AI generated text aspect of it?
Nope.
Okay, but
well, I think
it's,
I mean, I think artists were
regardless.
though. I mean, I'd like to step back and say that artists have been doing work in generative text, you know, in AI for a long time, right? I think about folks in the UK that I met in my postdoc, at the University of Plymouth, and Jeffrey Cox being one of them. So I think artists have been envisioning it and playing with those ideas, but I think it's become a lot easier and mainstream now is a difference. And we're able to do more with it because of the better array of tools that we have. I mean, the artists were having to create their own tools back then, right? And they weren't always that robust, but they hearken to what we're talking about now and doing now. So I think that's a thing to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good point. Matt, you can stop sharing your beautiful screen. Thank you so much.
And Frode, thank you for the kind words. We didn't get a chance to say that, but thank you.
And you are going to write a piece for the book. You have 1 week.
Oh, 1 week?
Yeah, I mean, we're way over schedule, but if you literally have 2 screenshots of what you showed and just say what it does, that would be amazing, right? The whole point of the book is to inspire people, and here's a real thing. Randall, how much of that did you see? Oh, for crying out loud. Okay. Fabian, you go on, and then Matt, can you do a 30-second version just for... Actually, Brandel, I'll send you the tweet where I saw this.
Oh, okay, great. Hey, everybody, sorry.
Hi.
So two quick comments. One for Dini. I think artists have already imagined everything. I mean, I'm kind of joking, but like a lot of the technology we see today has been conceptualized like so long ago. To be fair, though, I think in itself that's super valuable, because only to come up with an idea, no matter how far-fetched it seems, and let people write with it, I think is amazing. That being said, what we see crystallized today, I think nobody would be sure it happened until it did. So I think it's also like the gap between wishing something crazy to happen and then, wow, it's actually available and usable despite, let's say, the limits. So I think very often when Matt, you ask like, oh, was it conceptualized back then? My naive bet, I'm not a historian, is like, yes, pretty much any time there was somebody who did think about it. Was it usable? Was it and were they able to go as far as consider an implementation that would be, that would take place? That's another thing. Now on the very super basic question is, I think it's a discussion we have very often also with Peter and a lot of people here. It's provenance. So here we see a lot of processing of the text, and then we can track the provenance. And I think that's indeed extremely valuable. And a lot of the time, I'm very critical about large language model precisely because there are knowledge washing. Like they break the link between an idea and then how it's being changed. And I don't think that's fair. I think that's really epistemologically, but even morally bad. And I think we're poisoning the well, basically. So I think this kind of work is very interesting and valuable. And so the question is, now we see the process of the transformation. Is the process itself, so for example, which LLM or whatever backend you're using, is it explicit somewhere? Or the prompt being used also explicit? So can we basically backtrack the process in order to understand how it works? And is it like when people, for example, share the result, if somebody reads the outcome, can they also understand how it's been done, achieved, basically? Thank you.
Yeah, yes, on all those
Thank you.
points. Any comments from you, Matt, before we go to Mr. Anderson?
Oh, so I think I can definitely get into kind of like what those prompts are, like the whole system, how it works. But I think your point is more the same principle of transparency and provenance that the tool makes possible for like the text should be kind of turned backwards onto how I'm designing the system and implementing it. I think is kind of your point, which I need to do more of. But separately, I would be happy to talk with you about how I'm doing currently. It doesn't necessarily come through to the end user right now.
Yeah, Mark.
Thanks. I find that really interesting. I'm probably not the only person whose mind sort of probably flew to this and heard the voice of Ted in the background saying, "With visible links." But the thing that I really love in this is as Fabian has brought up, actually is the provenance. Even however sort of tightly we use that term, but just seeing where things come from, and it's such a useful walk back from the way a lot of people are using the sort of ChatGPT things as a sort of magic 8-ball. So you get an answer, but you don't know whether it's correct. But this thing of being able to see where things come from, and even if you don't agree, I mean, that in itself is useful, because I think one of the things I'm sort of reflecting on is that as more and more stuff is being read effectively by a software agent rather than a human agent, if this sort of abstraction is showing us that a software agent may not read what we thought we'd wrote, or indeed what another human might read from it, that also is very interesting. It might make us change our writing style for the particular purpose, or it may just be a useful point of note. But it's really lovely to see, and I just want to say I really like the demo.
Thank you, Mark. I actually sent an early version of this to Ted Nelson and got exactly the response that you guessed. He said he said you're missing one thing, and it was his old picture from like the 70s of like two fingers kind of connecting text. But yeah, that's exactly the response I got from Ted Nelson.
That sounds positive, actually, from Ted.
Yeah. Well, I actually worked with Ted when I was writing my undergraduate thesis on the history of technology. So yeah, he was kind to me, maybe because we're already acquainted. Yeah, but
It usually gets worse over time, but anyway, that's all very good. Yeah, no, that's very, very good. So one of the topics we had, especially with Alan, who's not here today for some bizarre reason because he was tweeting earlier, was this whole notion of writing with LLMs. You know, building up AI clouds, to put it in my stupid little language, so you can combine in different ways, and you write and you have different control over it. So there's definitely a discussion to be had in this group, but I think we should have a look at the three-eyed monster that is Fabien right now, because he has also been looking to show us a new aspect of the world. But I do have to really urge all of you over the next few days, weeks, whatever, go to the theater. Whatever it is, just sit in a good seat and just pretend it's XR. It is so beautiful physically on the eyeballs to have that feeling of extreme resolution, as I said earlier before Brandel came in, you know, because it's reality, and the incredible amount of information that's on the stage. You know, when we put on current headsets, it's very different, but it was wonderful. Right. Fabien, do you want to talk or show, or do you want to wait a bit, or what's best for you?
I always want to talk and show. Is it ready? Am I ready? I don't know, but I'll try. So I will share my screen, wondering in which order I'll do. So please let me know when you can. I'll stop the notification so that there is nothing silly happening. Yes, let me know when you can see it, please.
Yes.
Thank you. So the idea is we had, I don't want to say numerous, I want to say countless discussions about manipulating a document. I won't enter what a document is, so I'll just say a number of pages stuck together somehow. And there is something, a software that some of you might be familiar with, which goes Calibre, which is managing documents, basically. And what some of you know, I do have a preference for the web for pretty much anything. So there is Calibre on the web. So I can take a book and I can download it if it's PDF, or I can read it in the browser or wherever, which is nice. I can tag it, edit metadata, blah, 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 make shelves and sort them and blah, blah, blah. What's interesting, though, is I'll take a random book, for example, The Future of Text 4, and I can read it in the browser. So I'll already open some pages, and what I have in the back is some 3D content. So
you turned it into EPUB? Oh, you monster. Yes. Do I have to watch this?
You can't have everything. It's the content, but let's not enter that debate yet. So yes, I can keep it as PDF. Okay, I'll show you the PDF then. The PDF is literally the PDF, which I think, I mean, if we want to go a bit further, I think we need, I mean, the discussion is about more than PDF.
Okay.
So what I did is indeed convert it in EPUB, because EPUB is a kind of HTML, basically stuck together. And then I can inject on the back of that HTML the typical A-frame page. And then I can also, if it works, share the view from the headset, which is this text is in 3D and the cube is in 3D. The cube represents the rest of the book. Now I just have the title, which is not even the correct one, but I hope it gives the idea, namely that there are already readers, like the reader for EPUB called EPUB.js. There is already an equivalent for PDF called pdf.js from Mozilla that also some of us played with in the past. Here it's literally just the title, but you can imagine, you see all the content is there with a specific layout. Not necessarily the right one, because it can be reflowed, but at least the content is there, so you can imagine, of course, bringing it and manipulating it. Why do I show this specifically? Calibre, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of it, but it exists. And in terms of, let's say, showing the richness and the potential of manipulating documents, I think it removes 99% of the quote-unquote boring work. Namely, we can just focus on the interface and the immersive interface of a single document or eventually multiple documents. So yeah, that was the presentation or the little demo I wanted to share today, that maybe Calibre Web, in order to be able to manage or go through whole documents, not just like a single page, could be a good starting point.
Fabian, that's great. By the way, in the chat here, I just gave you an HTML version of the book, so you can do whatever you want with that. Yeah. So you're basically saying this is a convenient way to get books into XR documents.
Yes, the book itself and the interaction is still up to us to define and explore, which I don't honestly want to delegate, because I think that's the most exciting part. But everything, let's say, from below this, like the necessary steps, for example, the converting PDF to EPUB, it's out of the box. You have a bunch of different format in, you can get the right format out. And some of the things, I don't know, like bookmarking or sorting a shelf. Most people who think of managing a collection of documents would expect such things. So I think in order to do a demo that show a library of books or a library of documents, I think that's it's a promising shortcut, I think, is my point.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you, Leon.
Really cool, Fabian. I have a question. Because we started with the sort of 2D interface in a web browser. Are you also sort of hinting with that it could actually be a sort of hybrid application, which, for example, the managing part could also be done in the train on your smartphone, let's say? And so is it kind of like a hybrid interface? Are you thinking about, yeah, sort of like that, or was it more like something to bootstrap you into XR?
No, it's literally, I mean, of course, if it's, or rather, I mean, the 2D part is already there. So that's the good part, let's say. In order to manage shelves or set of documents or documents, it is there and it's been used, or it's being used now by hundreds, if not thousands of people. So I think it's good enough for a lot of use case. And indeed, if you're on the train and you don't have your headset or no battery or whatever, for sure it works, it's great. But it's really a pragmatic viewpoint. And I just show, let's say, the last part, which is the title of a document and some 3D or whatever. But then ideally it would be backtracking, namely once you have one single document with a 3D view and some interaction in space, then you backtrack to say now it's end document is the collection of documents. The shelf itself, let's say, would also be in immersive mode. I show, let's say, the very last layer, the readers with the different format, or at least the single first one, let's say EPUB. But ideally, I would argue the management of documents themselves, the shelves, should also be immersive. There is no reason not to. It's just like to have a starting point, basically, to start at the last level with the reader. But in my opinion, the shelves themselves should also be managed that way. Immersively, I mean.
Sorry, notes. Yeah, I just So what we're talking about here, partly for those who may not be aware, is some kind of ways to interact with our book in XR. And I just, the transcripts as we have them now, as most of you know, are AI summaries slightly cleaned up. And we can, of course, link that to the full transcripts. That was just inspired by what Matt was talking about earlier with where things are coming from. Brandel, have you seen Reader in Vision yet?
Unfortunately, that's not the kind of thing I can tell you.
Okay. Okay, because one of the things I'm trying to figure out, and this should be a very public question, it's nice to just sit on your lazy chair and look at stuff and move your fingers and twiddle them about. But that is not a natural way to do all interactions in the world, obviously. Direct manipulation can be very, very useful. So is there a public-facing research, or can you tell me what needs to be done for a Vision Pro application to be touchable? So you can literally grab it and put it where you want something?
Yeah, so anything using the system defaults is touchable by default as well. So once you have sort of system buttons and system links and things like that, including on the web, if you just pinch and pull that window toward you, then it becomes within arm's reach, and you can tap all of those things, and you get hover, highlight sort of actions as you move in and things like that. Now that you have an app, you should submit it to the folks in developer evangelism and try to get a spot at the London Developer Center so that you can try it. You'll be able to get it on device and have some time with the folks in the lab there to look at some of the other experiences as well. It really only takes having some screenshots of stuff and some concrete questions about what you want to see actually with your application on the device. And once you have all of that sort of stuff ready, then they will be ready to let you in. I just did my public presentation last week.
And how was that? We all want to know.
It was so much fun. I'm really looking forward to hopefully deepening my relationship with evangelism, and hopefully at some point also being able to take some of this content on a roadshow around some of the other centers. So possibly in New York, possibly London as well. It might not be me. I've got a partner in the team in France who might be able to come over to do it. But I think it would be really wonderful to get more people across it and to understand what it is that they can do with Vision Pro and in particular, for my part, the web. But yeah, so I can't say whether I've used it, but you can submit that. Touch is achievable by default, but it's also not strongly recommended. People like the human interface department's guidelines say prefer things that are just out of arm's reach. That's for a range of ergonomic factors, but it's something that I do myself quite a lot, is having things in arm's reach and actually poking out of it. And so I think that a lot of people will have a lot of different ways of using it, and some of it will include that. Sorry, Danny. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's very useful. Thank you, Randall. Dini.
I want to know what Adam has to say about his research in conjunction with what we just saw. I think your interest in the way hands function in a VR space in conjunction with what we saw with Matt's project Beyond. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, you put me on the spot here. So in conjunction with LLMs, you mean?
Well, I mean, one of the things we talked about last week, because you're new to the group, right? Last we were talking about the lack of visceral experience in a VR environment. And here we are looking at manipulating, pages or work on a screen in front of us, and we're touching things. And what Ralph Froder and I are trying to do is manipulate these and edit and things like that in the VR environment, the XR environment. But, the lack of haptic feedback and touch, the experience of that has really, I think, been a missing factor in manipulating paper. I mean, if you read something like the Gutenberg Elegies, for example, right? the missing aspect of touching paper and smelling paper, makes it such a different experience. I mean, how does your work tie into trying to bring that viscerality back into the XR environment? Or did I misunderstand?
I've done some experiments. So one question is how it ties to LLMs, and one question is how you tie in more visceral experiences. And I've noticed that I did a prototype where you actually hold the text in your hands and read it, so it moves all the time with your hand. And I found that easier to read when you have something that moves with your hand. I would have expected that reading on a static thing floating in space was easier, but I found it more interesting to hold it in there. It felt more alive when I held it in my hands and could zoom with my hands as well as with my position of the head. So that's one thing. And also, when it comes to LLMs, it has really been a radical shift in my perspective, because many things that I thought were further into the future in terms of interaction is suddenly possible. So I think voice will take a much stronger position, where you could select things by voice if you're in a place where that's appropriate. But give me all the red documents, or put the document saying commands that is interpreted by LLMs. Usually computers have a big problem finding out what we're referring to when we say this or those or the things or these few documents or so. But I think now it's easier to translate those human ways of expressing things into computer actions. So I think it's a big opportunity here to have voice interaction now, and it's doable for people like me. I've been trying voice commands, and it's really, the quality is so much better than it was 4 years ago. So that's one thing, and that will reduce enormous amounts of UI elements visible to us. We could just ask the computer to fetch things that are not visible, not in the view, and that is very exciting. I don't know if this really answers the visceral part. It's because voice is maybe not as tangible, but that is what comes to mind.
Let me respond to that before we go on to the next part. But one of the things we're doing with Rob's project is we've got these, in front of you are 12 different text panels, and they're hovering in front of you, and you can pick up one and pull it towards you. It's the idea that you're going to open it with both hands, right? Your glove's going to grab it and open it up. And as you open it, the text will unfold. So you're not reading a lot of text at once. You can read as you open. You could read the headline, or you could read the text as it opens, right? And so we're experimenting with that aspect of using your hands in a way that puts you in direct contact with text to see if that makes it more readable and more experiential. But once we finish this, it'll be good to test that and see if that's really what I'm hoping will happen. Thanks.
Oh, Fabienne, Brandel, fight. No, Fabienne, you were first. Sorry.
Little anecdote, I think, in terms of speech. So I'm doing more and more ice skating. I love it. And sadly, I get ideas also while ice skating, which is very inconvenient, especially as a beginner. It's quite dangerous because I need to write them down somehow. And then I put the phone out of the pocket and I start to type the ideas, which so far I didn't hurt anyone, not even myself, so that's a plus. But I also want to get more such ideas on the move. And what I started to do is doing speech to text, and then speech to text to LLM, and then speech to text to LLM to text to speech. It's still very slow, but basically I can have a conversation with an agent, or at least an LLM. So some text processing with it. But like I mentioned initially during the introduction, my trade and passion is prototyping. So I don't actually want text in the end. I want like a new piece of software that does something hopefully interesting. So I started to write around lunch because I got the components mostly ready. It's like speech to prototype. I want to talk to my phone, convert that to text, convert that to code, run that code in the sandbox or those different code snippets in the sandbox, and that gets something. And it's not going to work. I can be upfront about this. That's going to be terrible. But I think no matter how terrible it is, it's still like you don't have the white page kind of drama or syndrome or fear anymore. You have something. And maybe out of the 5 proposals, some of them are maybe kind of a good bootstrap or even usable. So yes, I also tend to think that, yeah, we should be able to have both through the manipulation of text and code, being able through voice to do more creative things, I think. And yeah, it's work in progress.
The whole voice thing, I mean, I mentioned so many times the theater yesterday. I was excited by something, so I just spoke to Siri, remind me. And it's just basically flawless now. So yes, we should use it everywhere we can. Brendel.
On the subject of voice, something that is unfortunate about Quest is that it doesn't have speech recognition API built into web. It's already in all forms of Safari, which is very convenient, and that includes in WebXR, which is also very convenient. And combining that with speech synthesis is just a really fascinating process of being able to get actions that don't have to be sort of persistently and explicitly encoded into a user interface scheme, which is also just incredibly convenient. So I've only done a couple of short prototypes with it by saying things like, holding your hand and saying like, put a cube here and put a donut here, and then give me the color palette or make this red and things like that. But it's incredibly powerful as a modality. And I have attempted to inform Meta of the importance of having voice input via the web, and they have not recognized the value of it, but hopefully they will at some point in the future. But yeah, it's just wonderful to be able to have that as an extra modality, and I'm excited for people being able to use it alongside the other sort of gestural and positional things, like you were saying about deictic language and then dactyls and things like that. Having the idea that you can actually make the gestural inference of a point be part of that, and potentially even have that fed into an LLM, is absolutely essential as well. Being able to have information about head pose and finger pointings and things like that, so that you can take markers and indicate the timings of them and things like that. One of the things that's really fascinating, and you'll agree with this, Rhoda, that because it's so much more like a human interface insofar as you are, pointing and doing the things that you would do to and with another human participant, it makes you realize the gap between what you do to make a computer aware of your intentions and what you do to make another human being aware of your intentions. And there are, places where it falls hilariously and terribly flat as a consequence. But just having the ability to use pointing with your fingers in as light a way as we do, rather than having a persistent cursor. In real life, our finger isn't always a cursor. It's not always tracking some position. Whereas on a computer, our mouse never doesn't have one, and we do everything with it. Whereas we pick and choose which kind of pointing mechanisms we desire to use, right? Be they verbal or finger-based, I guess digital, or optical, and having that freedom really makes you realize how much further we can go with the notion of interface.
On that, the pointing to things. So I've been experimenting with the finger pointer. So when you do the finger gesture, it becomes like the hand raise, and that is really convenient. I don't like the hand raise all the time, but sometimes they feel a bit useful. And I've combined that with it becomes a hand ray, and when you curl your finger, you can move the object, and when you pinch or grab it, you can move the objects closer and further towards you. So it's a kind of a gradual way of, and if you fold it completely, you get the object in your hand, and that is a very nice way of doing remote interaction. Pointing and grabbing things from afar, and then you get it in your hand, you can study it, and then you drop it, and it returns to its original position on the wall or in a larger space. I found that interaction very, very fruitful, and I think we could explore that more. When it comes to text, and we have libraries with many books, we have text with many pages, many paragraphs, or whatever kind of units. But text is quite voluminous. Most books are many pages, and having a way of grabbing things from afar, looking at it, and then leaving it quickly is a crucial interaction, I think, for XR. Yeah, over.
Fabian, is your hand up new, or is it still?
No, yeah, it was just a quick example for this. Is Cubism. It's a game, a 3D puzzle. And one of the interaction you have is when I don't remember exactly what it is, but you roughly point in the direction of one of the pieces of the puzzle, and then it's going to highlight. I don't remember how, but let's say visually you see that this is the selected, let's say, piece. And I think you just do this. You, how do you say? You curl more than 3 fingers. I don't remember the technical detail, but anyway, I recommend. First, it's a fun game. Well, I have a bias, it's made by a friend, but in terms of how polished the interactions are, including this, like the remote grabbing of a piece that would normally be unreachable, I think it's really well done. I recommend having it a go. If I find a video, I'll put it in the chat.
It's very interesting when interactions should change. There was so much that came up there, where things are. One of the things I really am looking forward to is better understanding and experimenting with near and far. So the whole thing of how you pull. I mean, Randall did this amazing thing with the mural that some of you know. Instead of joystick walking, you make a pinch thing, and then you're controlling the entire mural to go around. It gives no motion sickness at all. But I really now want to honor the desktop, the physical desktop we have on a table. So when you put something onto the table, it becomes something else, because that's when you can use a virtual pencil. That's when you can use your finger in a different way. Because doing things in the air, obviously, it's very heavy with the arms if you do it a lot. So it's going to be amazing to look at the very far, the ambient, the main stage, so to speak, things that are just floating above, what we're doing here, what's up here, how that will change. And I do think that we need to be open-minded. The future of text is, of course, the future of text using other media as well. Voice will be hugely important. There's no question of that. But voice by itself has its limitations. So how can we put them together? I think that's amazing. You may notice my eyes flittering about. I'm trying to do an update for the book that I really want to show you soon. So I am listening, but there is a thing to show. Okay. Adam and Mark and Fabian, all have your hands up.
I'll steal the spotlight just to show the example of what I said, and it's going to be quick. So I apologize, but you'll see, I think it's worthwhile because, for example, one of the details I did not mention, so that's the game itself. You pick the different 3D pieces and voila, you see it. But what I didn't mention is the fingertips take the color of the target. And I think basically having this kind of preview, this feedback that you're indeed pointing at the right piece is what makes it like so, I don't want to say intuitive, but yeah, it works in my opinion. Oh, did I? Yeah, I did share. Okay.
Yeah, but you did, but I couldn't see anything. It didn't actually load the image.
Yeah.
Please try it.
Okay. Otherwise, I put the link in the chat, so I'll let it load. Let me know when you see my screen. Maybe full screen is better. Do you see anything?
Yes,
Yes.
that's much better.
Okay. So now look at the fingertips of the right hand. I'll pause it, but that's the purple pieces, and the fingertips, while targeting that piece, become purple. And when it was a green piece, then it was green. I think, yeah, any kind of feedback like this, especially when, Adam, you mentioned text, like I cannot imagine pointing at pages of dozens, hundreds of lines, and then basically hoping you're lucky and get the right line. So you need some kind of like intermediary feedback before, let's say, the putting action. And I think this, the color itself here was very, was a great hint.
What about sound? Are you using sound as even a tiny bit of sound to show the interactivity or to represent it? Because I couldn't hear that. So
No, not here, but I don't remember if there is sound or not. But in general, any kind of feedback, like I have haptic gloves also. It sounds like super fluous, and then anything that gives you some kind of some feedback is so valuable. It has to be, especially with touch, like really fast. But yeah, sound and yeah. Here though, the sound of the piece is trickier. The color really works because yeah, pieces have this specific distinctive, let's say, property. Not sure how it would work with sounds to be able to say not just I'm selecting something, but I'm selecting the right target.
Yeah, I want more articles on this in the book, obviously. Quite simply because it makes it convenient to refer to these points. But I hope that if Dini and I can do the work that we need to do, we will be able to make references and record things like this. For sure. Just going to see if the thing worked here now. Nope. That's weird. Mark, you have your hand up still?
I think, yeah, no, well, it's up again. I was looping back to something that, funnily enough, was actually sort of sparked by Adam's comment right back at the beginning, but we've sort of looped through it again, which is this interesting thing about how much text we generate in order to scaffold the task we're trying to do. This is especially true in documentation of a lot of process. And I was just reflecting on, I mean, ironically, in a group that's talking about text and the future of text, is how much we may be able to elide from that. So text that we don't need, that we're normally adding to reduce ambiguity in the message we're trying to put across. Because essentially, whilst one would obviously have to learn gestures in the way you learn anything else, but nonetheless, by that sort of expressiveness and my feeling, something that we find more intuitively instructive, might enable us to break away from a lot of text in some areas, not all, but definitely in the way that we document process.
Yeah, I mean, I think text is very powerful, obviously, but text is more powerful when it's used to its best characteristics. So yeah, absolutely. Too much text is not very useful at all.
Well, I would say that it depends on the presentation of the text and the categorization of the different parts of the text. Something that Omar Riswan posted recently, along with another person. Another alt whose actual identity I don't know. Where they were talking about the practice of reading a novel in a word processor and then making annotations and edits to it. And I find that really interesting and compelling because, you know, a lot of people would be interested in marking up or dog-earing or otherwise kind of altering their copy of a text, but because it's on a dead tree, then it's kind of an act of desecration and of ruining it for the benefit of either your future self or other people having the ability to use a book. And given how many people use libraries, then that can be bad. But when every copy of a book is as dynamic as that, and people have the ability to mark up or manipulate, then it will make it more memorable to be able to do that. But having the ability to discern between what you did over a book and the original text of the book itself would be an essential component of being able to live in a world where we do that, where we have a relationship with every novel and stage play that we read. But I think that if you start recognizing that we should do that, and we should draw a really clear distinction between the form of the text that exists that you're reading versus your responses, turning every novel reading into a reaction video, then I think then it at some level for me actually makes the profusion of texts, just the number that get out there, actually a lot more manageable rather than less, because we know we need to know the difference between what it is that I said when I read The Great Gatsby and the actual sort of copy in Fitzgerald's text.
Fabian, same topic or something different? Because two other things are coming up. I'm going to share my screen briefly. This was something that you can see, right? Yeah, good. That I discovered while working on the document, because as you all know, I really hate the idea of only having one table of contents. It's a ridiculously huge book every single year. So we have done things like a color view, which the new build, which you should see today, but it's not here. There's a line break between each color, so it's much easier to skim. We're also doing a different view where you will see, for instance, VR as a heading, and then below that, the headings that contain that. Another way to experiment. But we also have, as some of you know, you can do viewed by name and so on. But here's the funny thing. This is the new thing to me. So you see at the top of the list here, that's the name of the document. I think that is really, really bad to have there because of banner ads and things like that. I wonder if human eyes have changed because of banner ads, because when you look at a page and you don't need to focus on a banner ad, you know that that is not an attractor, it's a distractor, literally distracting from what you're reading, right? So I'm picturing around things like ads on the web, there's kind of a fuzzy outline of stuff we don't want to see. So the notion of, in the graphic design, having contrast, size, and so on to attract attention is well known. But I also think we need to now look at the distractor thing. So the title of the document here is useless information, because you know what document you folded to an outline. So therefore, it's going to go. So it's just going to be empty at the top, so that you now have more informational context. And one thing that I worked on last week, you will see here that all the author names are now in this view. That is not in the table of contents, and Mark is the only one who's seen that. These names of the authors are generated through the visual meta. Because if I now click on, let's say, Phil's, inside here, there is encoded that he wrote this. If I copy this to make a citation, as you know, we'll be quoting Phil rather than the editor of the book. So the key thing is really, it is so hard to design for skimmability, which is why we're looking at colors and all these other things. But just getting rid of the title was a really bizarre breakthrough for me that I wanted to share with you guys. That even
That's awesome.
It's weird, isn't it? Even the most central part of a document can be really annoying. And to remind you, if you haven't seen it already, if you don't know, when you go through our book, if you are in Reader, arrow down goes to the next article. So it makes it super fast to go through. If you are a Mac user, please try it. For me, it really changed how I could go through this book when I'm working on it and editing it, rather than page by page. And then I see on the side here the discussion between Peter and Fabian. Peter, you need to get a headset. You really, really, really need to get a headset of whatever brand, of whatever thing. But a lot of the things about vectors and cursors and virtual cursors, we don't have virtual cursors in a headset. You know, sometimes we have kind of laser pointers and so on. It is such a different interaction. I really look forward to hearing your thoughts, or maybe even you write them down when you go into a modern headset, because it's very different from what it was years ago. Fabian, I expect that as a new hand.
Yes, it's a new hand. Two quick things. First, hopefully I'll receive a new headset this week from the French company Lynx. And I say hopefully because, for example, for Peter, it could be interesting in the sense that normally you don't need any account from anybody. You can just use the headset. You don't need anything. You don't need a phone. You don't need an Android account or whatever. No, and even less a meta account. Like they position themselves specifically. Yeah, I'll show the URL, and if you want, I'll do like they were still very experimental, but I think I visited their office this summer. It's pretty cool team. What also I'll share my screen briefly regarding the comments from Peter, because it does make it's a good comment. It makes sense even without the headset. So I'm just trying to hint that you do need a headset to get it. You can still make valuable remark even without having a headset. So briefly, the interaction itself, and you can imagine it. So here, let me also know when you can see the screen, please.
No.
Yeah,
Still
I'm
waiting.
waiting.
Nope.
Still nothing?
Nope.
Still nothing.
Okay, that's weird. I'm
Uh,
going
And
try again.
Fabian, getting into Vision Pro applies to you as well. If you have the ability to use a Mac somewhere to write stuff, then I don't know what the bar is, but yeah, if you try to build something that runs in the Vision OS simulator, then that's the ticket to be able to get in. You probably need to go to London, but it might be worth it.
I have the ability to get a Mac and possibly to write something. So I'll keep it in mind. Thank you. Still nothing?
Yeah, no, we see your Fabian Benito has started screen sharing. We see the intent, but not the outcome.
It's so weird. Okay. Last time, and then maybe I'll try to share just the window, and because it worked before, right?
Yes, but it worked on second try.
Okay, so now it works, right?
No.
Oh, and Munich as well, if that's more convenient to you.
It would be. Well, then I'll invite you to click on the link. I can describe the interaction basically, but you have a widget or a piece of text or whatever, and when you pull it, you stretch it, you have a number, a discrete number, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can imagine this would be used, for example, to go to the next page or the next 5 pages, or pull the next 5 pages out of a document. And when you release it, snaps back to where it was before. What the comment from Peter that made sense is, of course, you don't have 20 meters long arms. So at some point, if you're going to go 200 pages further, either you speed up, so you do some scaling, for example, or you say, okay, I go from 0 to a certain number for a certain distance, let's say 1 meter for the entire number of pages. But I find it I find it quite convenient. Like it works pretty well. And then the silly comment was like, oh, so you can just, instead of saying it's a straight line, it's a circle, and then you start, or a spiral, you start turning around, dancing around until you get the right number. Honestly, it sounds pretty silly, but I think maybe if we repeat the same motion as we do in front of our desk, I don't think we're properly using the medium. So maybe dancing as a spiral to reach the right pages might. I'll try that. That's my point.
Yeah, I would also plug using a log scale for translations in the same way that So I square the translation on that mural transition that Frode mentioned and that is so popular is what it means is that for small movements they're very fine, and for large movements you have the ability to make them do a lot. And so that means that you can, at most, you can generally get to any fine position within 2 motions, because a small motion fluidly transitions into one that can do a gross translation, and then you can do another one, which is a fine detail adjustment afterward. So having the ability to do that is very easy and very recoverable, because you know that you're moving. So so you move by ones here, and then by tens out to here, and then by hundreds out to here, and that gets you within the right order of magnitude that you can then make fine detail adjustments on the subsequent sort of motion. Works really well.
Brandel, would you be okay with writing that down as an article for the book, even if it's just code saying this is all it does in a single sentence? Because that interaction you've made is absolutely phenomenal. I would really like to be able to share that.
Yeah, no, I think I could do that. I in general, I'm learning a little bit more about what I can share and how. I've been asked to appear at a panel at Carnegie Mellon in a couple of weeks, and I think I'm going to be able to get permission to do that. So hopefully, I will end up with being properly anointed to be able to speak on behalf of things like best practices over the web and in XR and things like that. So yeah, might as well start with just talking about that one particular thing.
Yeah, that would be really
Thanks.
good if possible. Thank you. I think I can share with you soon what I've been faffing about with her. Literally in a minute. Anyone else ready to speak?
Leon?
Yes, Brandon talked about best practices, and perhaps now it's time to talk about unknown practices. Yeah, and Frode, you were talking about that Peter should buy a headset, which he should. Basically explaining the difference between thinking about VR or thinking about XR and being in XR. And I find it very interesting that if I experiment in XR, then I come up with completely different possibilities and maybe thoughts. And I want to make a small bridge to text and interfaces to text that, yeah, we can think a lot about these interfaces, but maybe in the future there will be like completely different interfaces than we would imagine. And I'm going to show a small demo what I'm working on right now, which also gave me this feeling again. Let me quickly share it. And it's basically the idea of non-Euclidean space. So we really think in normal real world space. We tend to brainstorm like that, and that's also why you see a lot of why second world or second life, why it's a sort of replica of the world, or why Frode is sometimes longing for a globe where everything is visible. But if we just let go of that, then can you see this?
Yeah, that comes up.
Do you see it? Okay, so this is a monkey. So I basically started to play with the ideas that links or hrefs are not Euclidean. When we started to browse the internet, the jump links, they're actually very non-Euclidean. And I started playing with this idea, like, what if links are basically portals, which are non-Euclidean? So as you can see, this doesn't make any sense. There is a world rendered in, if we go behind it, there is nothing. So, and if I click on it, then I will be basically in that space. and I can basically jump from, I'm inside a 3D document now. It's not loading a different document. So I can just jump to different chapters basically in this document. I can put audio here, objects, text and everything. And this is basically a sort of guided chain of portals. And yeah, that made me think that why, or has anybody ever thought, and probably everybody here knows more about it than I, that is there maybe, you know, some thoughts on non-Euclidean paper where you could basically see a sort of document in a document? Yeah, I was just curious if text and non-Euclidean space has been researched at all.
Well, Peter certainly has thoughts on that. Also, Andrea was not here today. But Peter, anything you want to add to that? Is that a no?
Maybe he's on the toilet.
Yeah, maybe it's away. Fabienne, I think maybe you have a comment.
Yes, I have idea because I think yes, it's when we start to use the medium, we're very literal about it. So we indeed use not just the Euclidean space, but with our mesoscale. We were like normal people in a normal like the space. Not I don't want to say normal. Actually, I chuckled when you say normal. It's just the one we're used to. We're not used to be extremely tiny or extremely big. We're not used to when we go around a corner, the stuff that's supposed to be there is there. I'm very interested in the topic, and I read a little bit on cognitive science behind it. Like, how does it work? How can we actually navigate non-Euclidean space? And when you play a video game and you have portals, then right away it's non-Euclidean because indeed, like you can just go around space in a way that is like you can teleport around, it bends around. And from what I remember, it works because basically as we navigate through that space, if it's immediate and we see it, it's we do metrics. We look the distance between here and there. But if it's not, it's hops. So we look through a graph. So we summarize the space as a graph. So we can go from A to B to C, going through B. And then the geometry itself doesn't matter much. We just remember a graph. I'll put eventually a link in the chat if people are interested. But indeed, I think, well, on my desk, I also have a book on the architecture of libraries in or anywhere, actually, mostly in Europe. And I think that's the mistake of, let's say, if we want to manage a collection of documents in XR, the mistake is to keep it Euclidean. It's nice for an onboarding mechanism when we want anybody to be excited by it and to be able to relate. And we take, let's say, the beautiful model of a magnificent library. But I think we need to step out of it eventually rather quickly. But again, for onboarding, mesoscale, Euclidean, great. After this, letting go of it and portals or bending space or not necessarily redirected walking, but yeah, using the space more efficiently because especially most people don't have, even in XR, a 50 by 50 meter area to travel through. So if you can use, there are a couple of games like this that really benefit from using non-Euclidean geometry to be fun. And then you crawl under a desk and then you look around and it's a different place. And it works. Somehow you get used to it rather naturally. So I think even just for efficiency and use of virtual space within physical space, it's very, very interesting. And yes, including for documentary collections of documents.
Yeah, I agree. It's really interesting, and to the point of navigating. So Prey is one of the games that has non-Euclidean space in that regard, where you can come out in different places at a different scale, like that, as well as having sort of non-Euclidean, sort of Cartesian space connected in a non-Euclidean way. But there are also hyperbolic spaces like Hyperbolica, which is pretty sickening, but awesome as well, just to sort of rattle the brain cells a little bit. But the thing that I was going to say is actually much more mundane, is that hypertext and interactive software is already non-Euclidean space in that what we do when we move a document around, or when we move in relation to a document, is imparting some notion of intent on the presentation of that document. And so when we move with a book, the only difference between what we understand to be nominally movement and undertaking an action like clicking is that one has a discrete sort of cutoff. You can't partly click. You can't hint toward, except to the extent that Wikipedia, for example, has tooltip hovers of these page previews now, which is an incredible thing. But it's still sort of so close to a discrete action, ETE, not PET, that we don't understand that could be made even more continuous, that we could have some notion of a document opening up or moving in that way. So if you understand moving in relation to an object as being in the same category of actions, and the same category of intentions as clicking on or turning a page, or all of these things, then you start to see the entire fluidity of the space in which you can intervene on some kind of corpus of information and manipulate that view in a way that sort of continuously varies it into all of these different intermediary steps. It's very messy as a concept, I think, and I haven't probably done it particular justice, but I think that there's a lot to the idea that, yeah, documents are spaces, and that moving them is the same as changing them in all of these other ways. And when you realize that, to Fabian's point, that we don't need Cartesian space, all we need is feedback. We need the consistent rendering of action and result in order for us to be able to determine, if I do this, no matter what this is, then I get that, no matter what that is. And as long as both the action and the response are legible and repeatable, then we will learn to navigate no matter what happens. And that's exciting and terrifying. So hopefully that made sense.
So many comments. First of all, just a really brief thing. Sorry, wife is home. So this is those symposium transcripts we have, right? And they're AI summaries that I mentioned. And some of them you may want to go into. So what I've done now, in addition to a YouTube link to the original, you can click transcript in full and it goes to the back in an appendix where we have everything. I'll clean it up a little bit, but at least it is available in the same corpus, because the ability to have in-document links are actually really, really powerful, obviously. And I think it's easy to ignore because they're not as sexy as other links. So what we're talking about with this big discussion now, the non-Euclidean space-time and all of this stuff, is really, really fascinating. Hang on, just get a book. I mean, first of all, I don't understand why it's so difficult for me to get a rectangular PDF into a VR space so I can read it here and put it down on the table and scratch something on it. It sounds really boring, and it really is copying affordances of paper. Of course it is, except, it can float in space. But it is the basic. I think we need to get the basics done, because text has been developed for 5,000 years to be very legible in a very specific context. Once we have that done, we should do all of this. Now, this is a book I'm reading that is absolutely amazing. I'll show you one little diagram that was just, the whole point of it is that there is no such thing as time as a one thing. It's not like time is just different here and in a rocket ship. There is many, many different times all over the place. And it's a matter of granularity. Yeah, it's called The Order of Time, Carlo Rovelli. So if you then look at the further, you look at this stuff, lots of different times, but no, actually they behave like this. It's really wonderful. It's actually readable too. It's not too highbrow. It's not only Brandel who can read it. But the point is, we need to go absolutely to town on this. My concern, Peter, with some of the perspectives you bring up from books from a long time ago is, first of all, as I say in the introduction of the book where I link to your article, we have to look at this. You're absolutely right. But at the same time, when you are in XR, VR, AR, whatever, it is not a conceptual space. To your brain, it is a real space. That's really, really important. We still have two eyeballs. We still have stereoscopic vision. We still have our hands. We still have the things we have. Now, I think we all agree that where it gets really, really exciting is how we can interact with that real space, that other real space. And links are the beginning of this. But of course, a link takes you away from where you were. And LLMs and all these AI transformations, as Matt talked about earlier and showed us earlier, and Fabian had the great term, knowledge washing. You know, these are really important things. So what I would really like us to try to do when we look at these ways of carving and shaping interactions, which is so exciting. It sounds like I'm talking it down. I'm not. I think this is absolutely freaking the most exciting thing of all. I think we need to really define what for why, or why for what, or whatever the question, because it really has to be something specific. Otherwise, it becomes a big nothing. You know, not that we shouldn't do nothings. I would love to have many articles in the book about absolute rubbish because it went in a direction and then it stopped. To continue with my long little story here, the reason I'm not an artist, even though I started with Chelsea School of Art and that's kind of my soul, is I realized one day that only the artist can know whether it's bullshit or not. And I also realized that the artworks are only souvenirs from the journey of the artist. So much of the artwork you will see, in my mind, is not art. It is design. Because the artist pushed in whatever direction and made a lot of mess. And then at a certain point, you got to sell something. So then on purpose, by using that definition of the word design, they got to have a piece of output. But the actual artistry happened earlier. So I think we need to do a lot of rubbish. But it would be really, really good if we can converge on real stuff, such as our book or other corpuses of information. So we can do these crazy things. And very often, I think we'll come back to the tiny thing, like in the table of contents, don't show the title of the book, which was a crazy realization for me that removing that made it more readable. But I look forward to us doing crazy, crazy interactions. Now, as my final little bit on this, how many of you know the band Jungle? It's a London band. I just got an email alert. They got yet another video out. Please look them up on YouTube, because all their videos, they have amazing dancers. And it makes me really, really jealous when I see these people moving like that, because it's really proper modern art. How can we not move through our information like that? I mean, Brandel, I love you dearly, and I'm a bit of an Apple fanboy, but sitting looking at things and twisting your fingers, that's not enough. I know we all agree. Soapbox off.
So I wasn't joking just before about saying dancing around and spinning around in order to pull a document. I mean it. Again, will it be the most efficient way? Actually, it might. I don't know. Will it be fun and definitely a way to reconsider how we move? Should we dance through information? I gotta go, but that was a lovely discussion. So wishing you a wonderful week, and I'll see you soon.
See you later, Fabian.
Bye-bye, Fabian.
Yeah.
Yeah, on that matter of, sorry, somebody was saying?
No, I was mumbling. Please go ahead.
Okay, so one of the things that I've been thinking about, and I talked to a bunch of folks at the ACM West about, was this idea that we have physical actions and we have ways of moving our bodies. There are ways that just intrinsically feel good and are better, you know, and we also need to consider this in the context of accessibility accommodations and different people's changing, and particularly people's changing mobility. However, there are things that we can do that can feel good, and it would be useful to think about them as a repertoire of actions that we can bring to bear against digital inputs and inputs on the information systems. And it reminds me of, I believe the game, just look up Jumpman. Jumpman was a video game oh no, so it wasn't Super Mario Brothers. Anyway, so there was a game called Jumpman back in the early 80s. I don't know if you were involved in the industry at that time, Rob, but it was just based on being able to jump in a way that was nice, and they made an entire video game around it, and it was wildly successful because the mechanic was good enough that it was able to drive the rest of it, and so finding things that are sort of bodily positive to do, and then to use those for what is constructive within a digital system is, I think, an important kind of part of the puzzle. Once we have, body tracking of a kind that is adequate and up to the needs. So using things like Sony Copy, or I don't know whether Quest really ever got around to doing the full length mirror, full body tracking system. I haven't used I'm up to date Quest in a long time. I'm thinking about getting a 3, but I haven't seen if anybody's made good on it. But this idea that the inside out tracking doesn't have the ability to do full limb tracking from where it is on your face, but if you're in a mirror and it knows that it's you in the mirror, then it has the ability to track that and marry that with the sort of the immediate sort of non-reflected representations. I think that could have a lot of merit. I was going to say a lot, that idea has legs, because then you'd be able to see them. But I don't know whether people have kind of proceeded with that to an extent that it allows them to be able to make this stuff work better. But yeah, like we have a whole body's worth of action and movement, and one of the things that was really interesting at Waste was some people making instruments and recognizing that there are motions that feel certain ways, and what this guy was doing was actually using an inference-based training system to say, like, when I do this, I don't care why you do it. I want, when I do this, for there to be a certain kind of sound, and then training on a number of those things to the point where then dancing becomes creating that music. It was really interesting, and done with enough attention to detail for both the sonic qualities of that as well as the physical qualities. You need to be good at moving your body and good at deciding what sort of rhythm that should occur within. But I think that would be a really useful thing as a performance medium, and it would also be a really valuable driver for folks to be able to recognize that this actually should be how we do the rest of computing and spatial computing metaphor as well. We can load PDFs the same way that we make music.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the last 20 minutes, just want to push a little bit more on the book. I'm pushing to you, Brandel and Adam, because of the notion of digital graffiti, basically. Because I think, okay, you have very different reasons why you're not all over the book. One kind of legal, and the other one kind of thoughtful. When you saw the way that we navigate the book, at least in the software designed for the book, you press a key and it goes from article to article. That essentially means that the book becomes its own rich table of contents, because you don't have to go into page 3 and 4 unless you make a different press. So the reason for that is, it is ridiculous what you guys say in these calls. There is so much insight, so much depth, so much thinking, so much experience. So I really think that, like I said to Matt earlier today, a screenshot on one page saying below, I tested a way to do this and it was stupid, is really valuable. It is just as valuable, I tested this and oh my goodness, I learned this. We're doing this for the long haul. This is our grandchildren who will be reading this stuff if they ever find it. So the things you guys are doing now, whether it's the scaling Brandel did, a lot of the work that you've done, Adam, I really want to have you credited for talking about locking a book to your view rather than space. You know, that was a genius thing to try. I don't think many people in the world would even think like that. You know, so I'm really, really, really begging to get these things down, because this is not to over-aggrandize the thing that I started, but this is part of our legacy. You will have legacy in lots of areas, but what you put here is also part of your legacy. Don't make it too fancy. Don't make it too overthought.
Yeah, I will second that. Again, going to West last couple of weeks ago, and also just I tried to spend the weekend, admittedly on the Steam store rather than the Oculus store, looking for content that was worthwhile, and it kind of sent me in a bit of a tailspin because there's so much absolute dross and so little thinking actually happening even in VR applications since sort of 2019 or so. Like there's been all of the whole development of the Quest, but not a great deal of resolution in the sense of resolving on good metaphors for actually driving how an experience might work. And to that end, to blow my own trumpet, unfortunately, like every single weekender piece that I have made in virtual reality for the past several years is equivalent in quality, not in rigorousness in terms of things like user studies, but in terms of quality of the sort of the igniting question of most university, academic papers, and many of the things that have even just a couple of weekends worth of work on them, some number of dollars on various stores. That's exciting, but it's also confronting in terms of what it means that the sort of what else the rest of the industry is doing to lift the understanding and the state of the art. And it means that actually the relatively small and seemingly slapdash kind of interventions and efforts that we make can have an incredibly outsized impact if we have the wherewithal and the ability to share them. So I absolutely echo that statement, Broda. And it's not to just be like, yeah, I'm awesome, but just like actually it doesn't take that much for something to be enormously contributive to the mainstream of it. And yeah, like it's a possibility that Stockholm doesn't feel as connected to the center of what happens in technology, and Hungary also possibly. I don't know, but yeah, from Silicon Valley, it's not the only center anymore. There's a lot of stuff happening in Shanghai and London and other places, but I can say with confidence that and not because what I'm doing is great, but because there's not a lot that's better out there. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there's the Dunning-Kruger effect, and then there's the opposite of, you guys are very thoughtful, and sometimes you overthink. And for me, I'm very open with the fact that emotionally, sometimes I think, oh, we're doing something useful in the world, and then other days I'm completely, utterly useless. What am I doing? This is insane. This is a vanity thing. This is absolute shit. Most people go through some sort of depression of different ways of feeling they don't fit in the world. And, that's something we have to acknowledge, like a leg wound. No one's embarrassed by a leg wound. This, it's a temporary brain wound. And when we were in Rome, Mark and me, it was a really nice little moment. Somebody said something that I wanted to argue with in the presentation, put up my hand and said, Frode Hagelin, Future of Text. I don't know why I introduced myself like that. Afterwards, one of the professors came over to me and said, oh my God, it's you. I've been using the Future of Text Volume 1 for my students and for an entire year. It's absolutely amazing. The insights are brilliant. You guys are fantastic, la, la, la. That was nice. I'm not saying that the work we're doing here will get global acclaim. And I'm not saying we're Ted Nelson necessarily, but I am saying that, viewing, for some reason, I'm thinking about a 16-year-old in 50 to 100 years being annoyed at school, going back, looking at an ancient PDF or even a printout, coming across a little statement and one of the things we've said, and let me look at it a little differently. That's it. No, that's it. The only way we'll get there is to experiment. Now, please read the introduction to the book, at least, right? Because the internal links are so cool. And we've added now in Reader the ability to go back, just like you can in Safari. There's a back button now. You do Command hard, bracket left, and it goes to where you click. That means that, for instance, in the editorial where I reference a few of the articles, you can click on them, have a look, and go back. If you don't have it actually works in preview too, which is really annoying that Apple thought of it too. But it's really, really useful. So I could imagine, Adam, for instance, you coming across something that you don't like in the book or thinks is wrong or whatever. Write a tiny little paragraph and say, this thing on page so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. I'll make the link for you because I'm the only one with a master document. You know, you can't do it with only a piece. It makes it so much more engaging to read, you know, to have discussions going in. You know, you click around and it's not just a Wikipedia thing. Sorry, Mark, I've been going on forever, please.
No, I was just thinking, so when you're saying the go back, so you're basically, this is essentially a hypertextual go back. So it's last place I was.
Yes, last place you clicked on a navigation link, so you can actually.
Yeah. So that's been around since the 80s.
Yeah. It's nothing new. It's just knowing that it can be done in a document, not just on the web. So that's one of the really weird things. We tend to think of certain tools for certain things. So when I realized, hang on, why not make it like we have in Safari?
Yeah.
Acrobat.
Sure, but I mean, what I meant to say was there before. That wasn't an innovation of the web. That's the web took that from.
Oh yeah. But also there's an insane amount of places it's not. It's not there in Acrobat. I don't think it's there in Microsoft Word.
It should be in Acrobat. It's just a different. There are two different forms of going up in the stern, which is where it gets confusing. Who's off? All right, now, sorry. What I really actually was popped up to sort of say was that, and thinking of your point about Pip's right, that it was actually a moment of catharsis when I finally penned something for the book, because Fred asked me, and I said I'd tidy up a transcript a bit. And I thought, well, having done that, and I had author open, so I wrote a short piece. Having been accused of not having opinions on anything, I wrote my thoughts about PDF, not because I think I'm an expert, actually, really, because I'd like someone to come and tell me I'm completely wrong. My central point being that why are we misusing a document that was designed for non-re-renderable text? It was designed to make things print the same on different printers, and we've done a lot with it, and it's not the fault of the thing, but the question is, you know, it's like that thing, you accept the standards you walk past. Well, we're all guilty. We walk past this and we're not improving it. There's no reason that PDF or a different format couldn't have more of the structure. And I keep thinking back to the point that I think I can say, because you're in the room, and I think so Brandon brought it up a year or more back, and this thing about saying, well, one of the most interesting bridges when you're moving text from the literal as we have it at the moment, albeit on 2D screen, into the XR space, is not just having the text, but some of the structure, because then you have more affordances for doing things with it. Because like it's not, that's what we want to do. One use of text is to sit down and read it as if it were paper or digital paper. But I was intrigued by Adam's comment earlier that this, I sort of grokked that immediately. Okay, so if I'm actually holding the text, I'm looking at it. I suspect it's partly because we're culturally attuned to, we read a book, we hold it, and we shift it to keep ourselves sort of comfortable with things. It's actually, I find it really wearing just staring at a screen for hours trying to read, because my mind tends to blur off. So, anyway, that was a provocation at the bottom, the other small piece that I've added to the pile that is future of text 4.
Yeah, I also suggest you all, as I've said before, go on TikTok. It's absolutely amazing. I have learned more on TikTok than I have from other media, but now it's become very political. Almost 80 to 90% of posts are pro-Palestine, which I agree with, but it's horrible to have to suffer through them sometimes. So just to relax now, I go to YouTube Shorts if I have a few minutes. But the thing about TikTok that is so amazing, and I put here in the comments, TikTok text arrow down, I'm really trying to mirror it for our book to allow you to go through really, really quickly, get a clue next, get a clue next. Schneiderman, of course, talked about, the whole zooming and overview and stuff. So much of this can be done in flat documents. But the opportunities, of course, that we're moving into now are really, really amazing. Anyway, so yeah, please read the intro at least. Please send any more if you have it, small or long. And my last exaltation for that is a repeat of earlier. Go see a play and think of it. Pretend you're watching it in VR. It's freaking amazing. Sorry, Brandel, you're muted.
Have you read or seen anything about Jeremy Balance's virtual human interaction lab up at Stanford here? He does a bunch of stuff with virtual reality, where he gets people to put on a fake headset with just the rim of it, but with just being able to see all the way through it, and then has them stand at various vantage points at various distances while a real play is being conducted in front of them, and then they talk about what happens to you. Well, they ask about what happens to you based on sort of sitting as though you're on stage, or sitting on stage literally, or sitting at some varying degrees of remove, and what sort of psychological implications come from having your periphery obscured in the way that effectively virtual reality does at this point. Because all virtual reality, like normal human vision for sort of a healthy adult, tends to be around 190 degrees, and nobody will bother doing that for the foreseeable future, because it's simply so expensive to hit that much of a range. And we don't see very well out here, but we do see it. Whereas on all headsets to date, we have a much lower resolution, where we only see maybe out to here or so. So it's really interesting, because they're taking what you're saying about stage and really trying to explore the cognitive and emotional consequences of seeing things in a range of views and from a range of vantage points as well, in order to kind of come up with projections and assessments about what kind of immersive and spatial media would be desirable for folks. I know some friends who do podcasts, and they have tried to mix Dolby Atmos and the difference between mixing up one person talking and two people talking is, you'd be initially inclined to have one person mixed completely left and one completely right, but then you're sitting between them, and you need to look in order to imagine where they are. You need to be at least a little bit set back. But some of that is also to do with sort of transient familiarity effects of what we're used to right now, and what those things mean today. Like, if somebody's talking to your left and to your right now, it does mean that you're stuck between them, and they're probably both staring at you, and maybe they're cross about it. But that could change. There are a lot of these things that are based on norms and media and experiences today that can and will change in future. Sorry, go on.
That's amazing, the whole massive thing there. The thing about spatialized interviews depends how you listen, if it's headphones or speakers, of course. I've noticed driving in the car, if interviews are slightly spaced, it's easier to follow. But of course, it's a very different effect here. Now, so here's a question then, Brandel. Since our vision is very blurry at the edges, do you know if anyone has made a head-mounted display where you have the sharp screens here, but at the end, around here, you basically have blurry LEDs that vaguely show? Do you know these
Yeah.
on the wall, and they just do color? Has that been tried?
Yeah. So first of all, Apple Vision Pro is foveated, and what that means is that you get full resolution within about the 5 to 15 degrees of the center of your vision as tracked by the trackers inside. But then the rest of it is not rendered at that resolution. The rest of it is at a much lower resolution, and that gets the ability to render about, you get about double the resolution overall, because you get to be able to hit that center that well.
I mean outside the screens.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a fellow who was for the longest time at Microsoft Research and is now at Meta Reality Labs, Hrvoje Benko, and he has done a range of things with a range of different display modalities. One of them being having a high FOV, a high resolution screen in the center, and then having a projector behind it to be able to set up a room. And there's also a Microsoft Illumi room, which is a concept you did there. I think it was Benko who did having literally a ring of LEDs inside a Vive as a concept. Nobody's productized this, but having a ring of LEDs that is able to hit those things. One of the challenges with that is that our periphery is very well attuned to motion. So even if we can't distinguish that there's a thing here and there's a thing here, by God, you can tell if it moves from here to here. So one of the challenges is how do you de-res or properly reconcile the change in the spatiotemporal resolution there, because any aliasing effects that arise from having that, not from being a true blur, but from a downsampling, can result in significant discontinuities that mean that you notice it and it grabs your attention, and that's challenging. I mean, one of the other aspects of the actual sort of periphery within a headset is, vision Pro is dynamically foveated. It means that if you look down into the corner, no matter, like where your head poses, that part is in detail. Whereas when you have the static foveation of just having the ring as the periphery, then it means that potentially has the possibility of a much sharper transition between the high fidelity of that border edge and the end. Having a static foveation of the kind that Quest often uses. I actually haven't used a Quest 3 yet. I need to go grab one. Means that it's easier to be able to manage that. And in practice, we tend to be looking through the center of our little papers anyway. It's just that when we move, then we do see it full resolution there, and so you end up with that transition. But yes, so people have played with it. I'll find a paper. It's really interesting. I have not used it myself. I would love to. It's one of those things that I'm tempted enough to maybe try to build myself one day. But
what I would really like to build, Brandel, is a way for me now to speak. Record the last speech by Brandel and clean it up as a transcript so I can paste it into the book. It is so annoying when these things happen. We have these. It's, after this, I'm going to upload this to YouTube. And then, for the monthly ones, maybe I'll run it through a speech thing. Then I have to train it every single time on whose voice is speaking, which is crazy because we have these meetings every week. And then we have to do this and that. It should be, very Tom Cruise Minority Report. Grab the bit that you just said. And with our current AIs, they should be able to deal with that, to find those borders and do that, right? But yeah, thank you. That was very useful to hear. And we're running out of time. Anyone else or Brandel, anyone have any final comments, questions, suggestions?
Rob, you made an utterance, but your mic was muted.
Me? Oh, must have been internet. I'm just saying.
It was Rob.
Oh, Rob. Sorry, please, Rob.
I'm overwhelmed. This is just unbelievably exciting. And I didn't go to another Zoom meeting because I was engrossed in what's going on.
I'm glad it was interesting enough to say, Rob.
One of the things I keep thinking is that every time there's a new technology and you start to play with it, you start to see the possibilities for unfolding narrative, which is my main interest. And I'm really blown away by what the possibilities are for this. And I'm writing a book, and I decided to give one of my characters, a kid, a Vision Pro, so that he can be doing his work in a kind of near future situation. But I'm afraid by the time I write it, it will be obsolete. So I'm eager to get my hands on one so I can see the possibilities, feel the possibilities. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Well,
this is tremendous. The ways in which we can interact with text in all the other modalities. And when I read a book, I often go back and refresh my memory for some detail that I'm reading. And to be able to do that without, flipping through pages and trying to remember where it was would be terrific, especially as I get older and I'm not as alert about where things are. So yeah, I mean, this is going to be mind expanding. Timothy Leary should be here.
I'm glad you feel that way. I'm really, really excited to have you thinking about the sort of the experiential and literary dimensions of it. Something that I would love to for you to think about and maybe to talk about sometime is what you would do with this as a with some of these technologies to write for them. Like what is an experience that is kind of constructed with literary mores and processes, but one that is kind of for a text like this. You know, there are things that people do with text color, there are things people do with light, but a lot of the time when people add visuals, they cease to be writing books. And I'm really interested in what a book is. When you keep its bookness, but you can lose the paperness. So I look forward to more conversations in the future.
I'd be happy to talk to you sometime. Are you in the Bay Area?
Yeah.
So am I.
Awesome. Yeah, no, let's catch up sometime.
Maybe we could get together.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I just put recording back on. So we were talking about a gun as a pointing device, and Randall reminded us that the light gun was one of the first. Yeah, Randall, do you want to repeat? Because then Mark's comment, I think, is good to have on the record too.
Yeah, so I think actually one of the first pointing devices, almost immediately after the bowling ball, was the light gun, in part because it was actually for the armed forces, and they wanted to have sort of familiar modalities. But yeah, very instructive that solving a problem is something that is done with a gun for many people in many quarters.
The problem with the light gun they found is the end was very good for reaming out your ear. So this was found after in the Navy, after the fleet had gone through a year's spares in no time at all. Two things. Well, and the other is that they used to have on the end, it was on the end of a little fiber optic cable. And when you've been sat at the same desk for 4 hours and not much is happening, you naturally swing it around a bit, which of course snaps the cable. So yes, light guns have their problems.
Amazing. Life finds a way.
Just remember that Al Capone said you can get a lot more with a kind word and a gun than you can with a kind word alone.
Yeah, speak softly and carry a big stick. Yeah, Mark, you said doing knowledge work like breakout. I actually think there's something there. I think that in some kind of situations, we will have to do that. It mirrors a bit of what Peter was saying, of course, with how you change the cursor. Imagine having projectiles in a world that you have some kind of choice over their velocities. Because, walking down the street, do you guys have the same experience that you can tell the ground you're walking on, even though you're wearing shoes? Rough cement, smooth cement, you can feel it, right? It is.
I trip over.
You trip over. But it is absolutely insane. We have 6 different nerves in our skin for different kinds of sensing. There's so much that can be done there. So to be able to do, here I was kind of poo-pooing action at a distance for some interactions, but for other interactions, to be able to virtually throw a knowledge object and the way it hits something and the way it moves around can have serious use. That could be really, really cool. Also, it could be ridiculous, both which are good.
Paint gun.
Same goes. Yeah. Same goes for the talk about sound earlier. It would be interesting if a quote would sound different when you pass over it with your pointing or your selection method, your gun or your aim or your hand ray or your vision, that it sounds different to pass through different knowledge objects. So they get kind of a sound texture that you can recognize from a distance. You hear a quote, you hear maybe you could hear the difference between a verb and a noun at a distance.
That's really
that would be very interesting to try out.
It would be very interesting. Of course, it relates to the color coding and of course the cocktail effect. But how can we extend the cocktail effect further than your own name? You know, how can we
Yeah.
make it so you have a tuning for specific, well, to of course, certain extent we have, but how could we control that more?
Yeah, well, in general, it's about centering the intrinsic materiality of certain sort of informational content, and to be able to kind of devise a total sense of what it's made out of, and then to be able to have consistent renderings in the sense of not necessarily identical sounds, but properties that can be kind of predictable and predicted by a mind that's able to anticipate them. So, you know, one of the things that I've always rallied against is sample-based sound systems have a limited repertoire of actions that you can undertake on them. So, if you have synthesis-based sound systems, then you have the ability to modulate based on these multidimensional attributes, like Adam mentioned, the idea that you have verbs and nouns and quotes and all of these things. It's going to be overblown by a significant ways to record samples for all of the different permutations, you know, from combinatorial hell. But what you can do if you have an intrinsically multidimensional system where you have the synthesis of the timbre and of the resonance and of all of these secondary effects, then those are just twiddling slider that some, you know, creative technician somewhere has been able to kind of construct for the benefit of being able to kind of jam into those places. And it's that, but getting back to it, it's not about multidimensionality. It's about creating a comprehensive materiality. What is text as a material? I think that's a much more anchoring way of folks being able to understand all of the things that we're doing here. What is data as a material? What is information as a material? And, you know, I've got some friends at work who are really toiling on what is AI as a material, which is a really interesting one that I like their answer so far, but I don't know how it turns into product.
And of course, phase transitions.
Of course, yeah, exactly. All of those things kind of fall out of, or they flow from, being able to kind of explore what are the physical material sort of characteristics of these things in a world where nothing has to happen as a consequence of things like literal acoustics and whatever else. But, you know, given that our concept of acoustics has been of sound has been informed by acoustics, maybe it should have something to do with it, at least for the first 50 years or so of using computing as this new substrate. Anyway, sorry, that's a lot.
No, don't be sorry. That was really profoundly interesting on many levels, even though we'll have to go. My base philosophy is, of course, that of liquid information, about, you know, you should be able to freeze and thaw information. So there has to be, I think, both. Also today, I was sitting and working at Lavazza on my laptop, listening to music to calm myself down. My wife called, and I answered on my phone, and the transition from the headphones being from the laptop to the phone was so fast, I didn't have to press any buttons. It finally really lives up to it. So that changes what the headphones are, what these two devices are. So to be able to put your audio in different spaces is really phenomenally interesting. That was just obviously a beginning side of it. Anyway, if you have anything you want to add to the book, write it down and email me. Look forward to seeing you in a week. Any other closing thoughts? We're way over time, of course.
Have a great week, everybody.
Yeah, I hope you all have a very, very good week. And thank you very much for today and any given Monday.